One of the hardest things when we're doing PDA or any kind of change initiative is working out where do you start. In most contexts, which we say is really important, you're going to find a lot of politics, you're going to find capacity constraints, all sorts of things that just make it hard to do seemingly anything. So then you want to work out, well, how do I find out what I can do? We have a very, very simple approach to do this, and I can imagine some people who are listening to me will end up saying that just sounds too simple. But you know, when you're doing things, you have to have basic heuristics to deal with complex issues. And we call this the change space model, and we say you find entry points by essentially discussing what the change space is for your work. What do we mean by this? In the change space model, and you guys have already learned about this, we have 3 different factors that we say determine the kind of space you have to do anything. The one is your authority to act. The other one is the acceptance of the kind of change that you're trying to introduce. And the other one is the abilities that exist to actually get those things done. You'll read in our notes a little bit about what we mean for those 3 concepts. Now, when you're in a situation and you've broken the problem down into its constituent parts through something like a fishbone diagram, you would identify many different areas that you could engage in. The first thing we'd say about finding your entry point is that that kind of initiative breaks them down into small enough bites so that you can actually do a change space analysis. If you say, well, we want to do a change space analysis on whether we can do judicial reform in Cambodia, I'd say that's a little bit too big. If you break it down and you say, well, we're interested in seeing whether or not we can improve the quality of decisions in the courthouse, then you'd say even too big. Go down further, and then ask, well, do we have the change space maybe to change the way in which the judges make decisions in the courthouse, or the way in which the court goes to meet people? Do they do it on motorbikes? Do they do it in a courthouse? How does that work? Now, when we do this, we ask 3 questions. One is, what is my authorization? 2, what is the acceptance for the change? And 3, what is the ability? I usually try to do this in a group rather than as an individual so that you can have some arguments about these things because they're not precise concepts. So if someone says, well, I think we have a lot of authority to do this, it's really useful if someone says, what do you mean by that? Whose authority? How do you know that it's a lot of authority? Someone says, well, I think we have a lot of acceptance. Someone else will say, well, I disagree. I think that these people don't accept it that much. This is not an academic exercise. This is much more of a real-world practical exercise where we're trying to tussle with kind of how much space there is to move. So I generally will get a group together and say, tell me what you think about authority on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is we have everything we need, 5 is we're kind of getting there. What do you think about acceptance? Scale of 1 to 10. What do you think about ability? And the first question is, well, what abilities do we need? Great question. Let's talk about that. Let's have 4 or 5 of us make a list of the abilities and then say, scale of 1 to 10, what's there, what isn't there? Now you'll notice that this conversation is not only giving you a number between 1 and 10, it's also giving you a significant amount of information and perspective and assumption that you have about what these concepts are and about how much they exist. Then when you come out and you say, well, in this area we have a lot of authority, a lot of acceptance, but not enough ability. Say, well, you don't really have space to do anything there because the people can't do it. Now, the entry point for you there is not to do nothing. The entry point is, well, let's build ability. And because you've had a conversation, you know a little bit about what you think that ability constraint might be. Maybe it's about training someone in using a computer system. Maybe it's about providing more money in a specific area. Or if you come out and you say, well, they have a lot of ability, but there's no acceptance and there's no authority. Well, does that mean you do nothing? No. It means that you start to nurture the acceptance and the authority using a specific strategy in those areas. Now, you're going to do this all over your fishbone diagram, and in some places you'll find that you have sufficient overlap between high levels of authority, acceptance, and ability that actually there's intersection. Those are the areas where you can start to actually do something new. You can start to say, what is the new idea, what is the new change, and you can actually begin with it. In some cases, it might be very small things on your fishbone. And I would say, try it a little with the very small things. The thing that we find is oftentimes when you start something small, it impacts the acceptance, authority, and ability on other parts of the fishbone and creates more space for change down the line. So this is a heuristic. We find it a practical, simple, yet very powerful heuristic that needs to be put into a conversation to help you determine where you start and what you do in the areas where you start.